Welcome to the Mantra Dad podcast. Today, my guest is Bob Lair. Welcome to the podcast, Bob.
Thanks, Adam. Such a joy to be here, and I was really thrilled. I met you on Tuesday night over at the Porter Pavilion, and you said, how about a podcast? Maybe something about getting to be 80 years old. And I just loved the idea, and I wanted to run with it a little bit. Quite an accomplishment in one sense, and on the other sense, we'll get into that a little bit,
Right.
where I want to go with that.
Absolutely. So being an elder here on Kauai is kind of a big deal, I would say. I mean, you lead new warrior trainings through the Mankind Project here, which I've been blessed to have gone through and felt very transformed afterwards, and then joined the I groups here and stayed connected with the brothers as much as I felt that I could. And now you are here, and thank you so much for joining me. 80 years old. What an accomplishment for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So why do I feel it's an accomplishment? I had a pretty normal childhood. Mom and Dad were there. I had two brothers and a sister. Grew up through Boy Scouting, and just felt I was fairly lucky. Everything worked out really well. Couldn't really handle college well. Joined the Navy. It was an outlet. I wanted to be a pilot. First year of college, my eyes started going past 2020, and next thing you know, you can't fly. So I said to one of the Navy men there, I said, what's next? He says, join the Navy. So I did. I spent 4 years. 3 of those years or 2.5 of those years were out here in Hawaii, Barbers Point, flying as an air crewman. Got out of that, and well, time to start having a family, get going. So I did what I thought was traditional, and started a family. And somewhere after the birth of my first or second, I was probably in my middle 30s, I came down with crippling rheumatoid osteoarthritis, which the doctor said, impossible. Nobody gets that, and you're probably not going to recover. So kind of like set me back in my tracks, and decided that there's got to be a better way. There has to be something. So I started to look at alternatives. Encouraged by my wife at the time, picked up a book by Pavlo Arola called Health Secrets from Europe. And in that he said, mostly you can get on top of everything if you learn to fast.
Really?
Yes. So I thought, wow, fasting. Called Mom up. I think I could get better if I fast. She says, no, people die when they fast.
Yeah, that is a common misconception, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I read through the book 2 or 3 times, small paperback, and said, okay, look, I'm really sick. I'm really in trouble. My life could be done. I believe there's a possibility here. So I outlined myself a 10-day fast. At the time, my fingers were swollen out to here. I was in this Position, laying on the floor, crying a lot, and hardly eating anything. 3 days, the swelling had gone down to, I could see the webs here were gone. In 5 days, I could bend my fingers. I've never looked back.
Is this something that was diet related or psychological, or is just your lot in life? How do you explain kind of coming down with rheumatoid arthritis?
Okay, let's go forward to 2021. I'm 80 years old now. So at that time, 32 or 33 years old, I didn't really have an explanation. Diet worked. I thought, well, diet is good. I had a relapse 5 years later. I had another relapse. Finally, I got myself out of it. So it's had to be somehow kind of a way of life. Let's go 2021. I'm with Mankind Project. We define our lives, men, as P.I.E.S, the acronym P.I.E.S. Physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, P.I.E.S. Let's go back to me 32 years old. I was physically out of whack. I was intellectually out of whack. I was emotionally out of whack. I was spiritually out of whack. I didn't think I was. Looking back, I was.
Wow.
I was pretty out of whack.
So how do you explain that? Or why were you out of whack? Just you weren't taught it, or you hadn't seeked it out yet, or you were still young, or you didn't have the right location to find the stuff that would put the whole pie together?
Yeah, I didn't think I was taught it. It probably wasn't modeled it. I wasn't modeled it from my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my teachers, my school teachers, college. Certainly wasn't modeled in the military. It was to a point. We did stretches. The diet was okay. Um, I didn't put it together as a package. So I really wasn't taught, wasn't modeled. I was a good old American boy, played in the dirt, was a survivalist to a sense. In the Navy, one of my goals was I thought I'd like to be a Navy SEAL. At the time, it was called UDT, Underwater Demolition Team. So I was pretty healthy. I was a pretty robust guy. So what led me into this was let's see, not mistrusting, but misusing my health, misusing my intellectual ability, misusing it in ways that weren't really conducive to overall health. So physically, I kind of collapsed. My diet was okay, but a Big Mac and what do they call those, super slurps, wasn't working too good. I wasn't probably reading as much as I could. I wasn't studying very much. Emotionally, I was on an emotional roller coaster. I thought I had the world by the nuts. It's okay. I'm a good guy. I like to communicate. I wasn't really doing any of that stuff. Spiritually, I came through a fundamental Christian upbringing, so I had a little belief in God and believe in Jesus. I believe in what was happening. Didn't really practice any of it to a devout point. So I misused everything. And I think my whole body just said, enough. You need to reboot, which wasn't even in we're talking about 1973, 74. Reboot wasn't really even a term then. We didn't reboot easily. My mother gave me some suggestions, she had a book of encyclopedias there, but Bernard McFadden, who was a health practitioner in the 80s, in the early 1900s. And so I had that available. I knew a little bit about things. I misused everything.
Yeah, I totally understand how that could happen. And, when the culture is kind of reinforcing a lot of those, I guess, habits or the misusing of what this body and this mind and this spiritual device as a communication device, for love, for passion, for potency, for love of life. So what was it that shifted you, or where you knew you needed to make some serious changes in your life?
I was going to die. I laid on the floor and said, okay, I'm going to die in a fetal position, or I'm going to pull this together and get through this thing. And I'm going to use this book as a starter because I read so few testimonials. There was no internet to do research. It was all make a telephone call on that dial phone that we know about now, and read books. And one book led to another, to alternatives in everything. I found there's an alternative to physical health. There's an alternative to intellectual health. There's alternatives to spiritual health. There's alternatives to emotional health. I would go to a movie and cry, but I didn't really cry about things that were emotionally sensitive.
Like the things in your own life.
Yes,
like you
of course.
probably weren't so connected to your own life and your own soul. And what about your partner at the time? Did you have a relationship with her?
I thought I had a great relationship. We made it through the first 12 years or 13 years. And all of a sudden, things weren't working. I stepped out of the relationship because basically sex wasn't working for me. And that was huge. And at the time, I felt kind of like king on the hill. And this was after I had already collapsed with arthritis. So now I'm like, okay, I got this all together again. And in that relationship, I was with Liz, taught me that I needed to look deeper into everything. I needed to find out what made me tick. And so that's been my quest then. So during that time, I went to a biofeedback seminar. And the biofeedback was great. I learned how to control my breathing, my heart rate. I could control my thoughts. and we listened to a little audio thing. So if I sat there and I relaxed and totally, it would go, or get down to like almost zero as far as amplitude and frequency. And I said to the instructor, this is great. Can't I just bring it, flatline it? No, not in my class, because that means you're dead. And I don't want you to die here.
Yeah.
But I want you to know that you now have control of things that you never thought you could have control of.
Wow. So that seemed like that was probably a major milestone in understanding how to control the breathing and the thoughts.
Yes.
The incessant monkey mind. You found a way to quiet that down.
And I thought, okay, this is good. I can do this in a couple of years. That was what we're talking about, 80. That was 40 years ago. That was over 40 years ago.
Wow. So you've been practicing these
For 40 years.
techniques for 40 years. Wow.
So at the time, Adam, I had a little epiphany. I thought, wow, suppose I could learn this stuff for 40 years. I could teach it or work with it for 40 years, and then I could teach, learn, and work with it for another 40 years. So I'm now reached the point, I'm 2/3 of the way.
Wow. What a goal.
Yeah. And so it's a little daunting.
Well, I think that's a good thing, and it keeps you challenged, and
Yes.
it's directly resulted to how you feel and look and act in the world, wouldn't you say?
Sure. So let's go back now. I'm now learning techniques in physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. I'm learning techniques. I'm researching. I'm going to Alan Watts. I'm going to Ram Dass. I'm looking at the Buddha. Researching everything possible that doesn't seem to be mainstream. So the thing for me was to really look at, this is mainstream. What are these people doing? And let's go into some let's go into some old folks' homes. I started visiting, so I got a little bit better after the arthritis. I started visiting old folks' homes, and I started talking to people. And I said to them, how did you get here? You know, how did you get to be 80 or 90 or 70 or whatever they were? And everybody had a very interesting story. So I decided, well, I need to work on this. I need to understand these things. So I read books on it. I followed more practitioners. It didn't come easy, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't come
I
easy.
wouldn't think it would.
It came along one step at a time, one click at a time. And every time I went forward and I felt really good, I tripped. I fell down again. In every one of those endeavors. Physically, I tripped. Intellectually, I tripped.
Yeah,
emotionally, spiritually. So something compelled me to get back on the bicycle, to get back on. And I'm not sure exactly what that was. It was wanting to learn to honor myself, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is the beginning of learning to love myself. I had no idea what I was headed for or where I was
And
going.
caring about yourself at the
Yes.
very least. Like, it's so easy to just put all this effort into everyone else in the life, but man, getting back to the self, how important and how pivotal a realization that it's just right there all the time, contained in this body.
Right.
And everything about this experience, learn to honor it, be proud of what you're doing, and learn to be conscious and mindful about how you create in this world and the people in your life. How cool.
Yeah, cool. And I'm an experiential learner. I'm the kid who, when they said, don't put your finger in the candle, you get burned, guess who put their finger in the candle, right? Same thing with riding your bicycle. If you ride your bicycle too fast down the hill and you're out of control, you're going to crash and burn. Guess who crashed and burned? I was a tree climber as a kid. So I loved to get to the top of the tree. One day out of a 60-foot tree, I was at the top, and I was probably 14, maybe 15 years old. The branch I grabbed hold of broke, and I went down through the branches. I didn't get critically wounded, but it was a wake-up call.
Definitely.
I've crashed my motorcycle. I crashed my cars. I've crashed an airplane. I learned to be a pilot. I flew an airplane at night trying to pick out a landing through the top of a tree.
Wow.
And damn near bit the
Wow.
farm. Learning experiences. I don't implore people to do that. Don't do what I did. So, what's the softer approach? How can I
Mhm.
reach to people in a softer way to help them come with some of the wisdom, knowledge, experiences that I've done? Um, Honor and bless them is one for sure. You know, honoring and blessing you for what you're doing. You're trying to reach out to people, and we're now doing this in a modern communication form. Um, so I did readjust physically my diet. I learned what worked for me, what didn't work for me. I got into macrobiotics. I got into mono foods. I would do one food for a week
Mm-hmm.
and see how I reacted to that. Um, I learned that food combinations were important for me. You know, hamburgers didn't go good with the bread. There was a protein carbohydrate mismatch. Sugar didn't work with my breakfast cereal anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so gradually, by researching that and by studying macrobiotics and learned to be a macrobiotic cook for my own personal self,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to tune up my my diet to get work for me, and that was very successful. And I felt really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was learning at the time, do things that you really feel good about, take credit for it, and have something behind that. You know,
Yeah, well, you're seeing the results
yes,
on
right.
the input. You're getting the output, and your entire life can change,
And my life did change.
and is it's still changing, wouldn't you say?
It's still changing. Absolutely. Yeah, my life doesn't ever stop evolving, getting more tuned in, more honed, better. Yeah, better in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you get to be 80, you're not doing what you could do at 70, what you could do physically at 60. So I can do other endeavors. So 10 years ago, I got involved in the Mankind Project, and that was a good friend of ours named Matt Kirk, invited me to come and sit at an I group with the idea that we had done coyote mentoring training together with John Young in Duval, Colorado, and that happened to be down at Santa Cruz at the time, I think. And Matt said, "Hey, Bob, we need some grandfather energy in our I group. Why don't you got some grandfather energy? Bring grandfather energy in." So I went, sat in a couple I groups, and the guys were new and all right. And I'd studied Byron Katie. I'd been through Marshall Rosenberg. I'd been through various other trainings. I'd had my own group of Robert Bly's work, Gathering of Men, prior to all that. And after a couple I groups, I said to myself, "These guys got it all wrong. They missed the boat. This is." One of the men sitting there was Larry Ryan, known as Doc, on the island. He had come with Mankind Project here by himself. He was initiated at Hammer Woods, Milwaukee, Wisconsin area in '91. Had pretty good background behind him. Was teaching medical approach for nurses that wanted to work in hospitals and doctors. Pretty knowledgeable guy. So he, out of the tongue-in-cheek of which kind of guy he was, said, "Hey, we got a training coming up. Why don't you go to the training? You can straighten them all out. You can get those guys on the right track." I mean, he was just very cool about it. And so I took the bait. Well, here I am, man. I'm Mr. Superman. I can straighten these guys out.
Sure.
And so I went to the training. New Warrior Training Adventure. It was over at the Big Island at the time, up at the place called Bond Estate, which is a big old estate on Hawaii side. And Friday night I showed up, pretty laughing and joking, and things were fun. By Friday midnight, I had realized I stepped into something that was way over my head.
Wow.
Way over my head. And of course, you did a training, so if you remember Friday night, it was exciting, right?
Yeah, there's definitely I tell you what I felt is that there's serious brotherhood. I really did, and I felt like we weren't here to hurt each other or to pick each other apart. We were here to make everybody around us better, and
Yeah.
that's what I felt. And the authenticity definitely was there for me. I felt like, okay, we're here to help each other, and thus I could relax, but also feel like, okay, yeah, I was in for something. I was definitely in for. This is what I paid for. You know, I knew, and I met you before the training, and I was like, yeah, you know, I really need this. You know, I knew it. So, yeah, but definitely the brotherhood is there, and the support that I hadn't felt in a long time, if at all.
Yeah.
And it's very unique training.
And I agree with you, Adam, that was really special. And the fact is that by Friday night, I checked in at 5 o'clock. By Friday night at midnight, I was already realizing that I could be vulnerable. I could cry, and men were going to support me and love me, and not, oh, sissy, pussy, that stuff. That wasn't going to happen.
I don't know why there's so much shame around crying. I don't know where that started, but that's got to go. And man, I'll tell you, there's a lot of cleansing that happens with tears, and it being a tool to work through things, and babies cry all the time, and then they just kind of stop, right? And now it's just like, I don't know what it is about the vulnerability that comes with the men's group, but yeah, crying is definitely okay.
And that was a good one. And then as we go through Saturday, I learned that I can trust these men here. They're not going to step on me. They're not going to call me out on something. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat. I'm too this. I'm that. I'm not educated. I wear glasses, So these men were supporting me and loving me, and I got to do different processes with every man that was there. And so by Saturday night, we're only talking 36 hours now. This whole thing happens in 48 hours. I was realizing that this was a bunch of men put something together that baffled me, and I loved every minute of it.
I did too, and it feels so essential. It feels as though, I remember questioning, why are we doing this more often? This seems right.
Right.
We like the men's tribe, and yes, women of course have a place in our world. There's no doubt about it. They would want us to go to this training, and it's just like, it makes you better all around, and you're able to hold your life in a way that you feel like more powerful, more grounded, more in yourself. You found yourself. There's something that happens with an initiation of any sort, where there's a crossing over where you can't go back. There's no going back. And yeah, burning up the past and feeling that support of that tribe that so essential and is just lacking in our everyday world unless we seek it out and gather and create it ourselves.
So the bigger question is how do we reach out to the whole world? And the possibility is that maybe the world is not ready in mass to go there. We need to go there on a certain evolutionary path. You and I talked about the evolutionary possibilities. 3.5 billion years ago, we were oxygen and hydrogen, maybe, if we were that. And, moving forward, you come into maybe the last 2 million years where the human form stood upright. Listened to a podcast one time, and this guy was joking, and he said, what do you think about the first fish who walked out of the ocean or got thrown up on land? And he says, whoa, man, what a hostile environment. Nobody could live here. This is ridiculous. And yet, here we are. We're possibly the byproduct of that. How that all happened, evolution seems to put that in there. Adam, you and I talked a little bit about believing that maybe there's something deeper behind the whole thing. And so that's one of the impetus for me to want to stay focused, to stay onto it, is that suppose this is cosmic energy wanting to see itself, something like that. This is universal energy, a universal form that wants to see itself. And we're in an evolutionary process, and this little snippet of mankind being here in the 3.5 billion years we've been here is that we're 2 million years maybe. That's nothing in the overall scheme of it. So where is it going? There's a possibility that artificial intelligence, we're a product in that line. We're just a snippet of it getting there. Artificial intelligence. And maybe that's what the cosmic thing is. It wants to see itself in some form.
Yeah, it seems like we as humans are birthing the next humanity. Yes. And it seems so plainly clear. And definitely I'm really glad we're segueing into the future here, into this trajectory of artificial intelligence. And it can come with a little bit of the unknown, like a little almost for me, it's like queasiness of like, oh man, are we just gonna become integrated with this massive machine of sorts, like the cloud or whatever it is, and it's just like, what is our place in all of this? Should we be focused and excited about birthing the next humanity? Should we have trepidation around it? Like, how do we best prepare ourselves for this shift?
And I think it's a great question, Adam, and I think it's something to ponder over. In the meantime, for me, not to get lost in where it's going or where I came from, and stay more into the now moment. Eckhart Tolle, go to a tree, he says. Ask the tree, what time is it, tree? What year is it? What date is it? And if you get an answer, let them know. I haven't got an answer yet.
Exactly.
I haven't gone to the leaves and the trees. So what can I do with myself right now in this moment to be a better person? Mankind Project is part of this. I'm wearing a logo on Boys to Men. For me, fortunately, I came through a very loving family. And when I got into Mankind Project, I realized there's a lot of men out there that had father problems, maybe no father, maybe an abusive father. Now, when working with Boys to Men, we went to the local school, middle school here in Kauai. The project's been started in Hawaii about 5 years ago. And going to the principal and said, could you help us with the boys at risk? And he's looked at us kind of quizzically like, do I need to research that? No, I'll give you 10 names right now. Sponsored and recognized and started working with these young men. And for me, what it felt like for me, I was able to be there and offer a young man some kind of hope in what he felt was a hopeless situation. And that came out of me wanting to love him and listen to him unconditionally, and that I could then be vulnerable with him. He could be vulnerable with me because what's said in the circle stays in the circle. And those boys learned to trust us. There's 3 of us were doing this down here in Kauai. And it was wonderful. It was a great experience. I felt like I touched some boys in there. Prior to this, I spent 22 years in kindergarten, touching kindergarten children's lives in a different way and helping them do extracurricular activities.
Wow.
Early on in my life, I had a ski team, and then we went skiing. We did little carving, and we built things out of stones between Montessori and Waldorf education. Worked a lot with the kindergartners. And it's really great to have a kindergartner 20 years later come up to you and say, hey, Mr. Laird, do you remember the time we did this little thing, we did this little project? And I'm like, really? And this is my wife, and these are my 2 kids. So
Wow.
that's, Adam, how quick it goes. You just introduced me to Grace. So it's, Dad, this is my boyfriend. And guess what? I'm pregnant.
It's coming. Yeah, from mermaid outfit to a pregnancy. Yeah,
Wedding gown. Yeah.
Wedding gown.
And so in that small snippet of life, it goes really quick.
How many lives do you feel like you've had here? Just in this as Bob Laird, like probably at least 4 or 5 different in probably unified but separate lifetimes of where you've planted yourself or reinvented yourself or had an impact in your community. So for a man or a young boy to have your influence in their life gives them some sort of hope that they can go, there is more meaning here. It's just like there's a way out of this suffering, or there's a way into myself, and there is this supportive person. There must be others, it's such a interesting dilemma of young boys not having the mentorship and the being lucky enough to have someone guide them.
And the other part of it is that somehow in the overall aspect of everything, it is what it is. It is what it is. You just mentioned suffering. I struggled with suffering in the Buddhist line for years. Suffering is like the first thing that happens. So I talked to a young monk, and I was at the Garshan Institute in Prescott, Arizona, And he said to me, think about suffering as being just stress. So if you take the word, and he realized that I was struggling with the word suffering. Suffering to me meant I was bleeding or I was broken, and suffering takes me back to when I was arthritis and I laid on the floor and I was really suffering. I was in a bad automobile accident. I was in a hospital and I was suffering. I was broken. I was physically broken. I was probably mentally broken too. So he said, if you think about suffering as really stress, so if stress is what you're dealing with, then you can handle with it maybe easier. And that made sense to me.
Well, if you had some techniques or something.
Sure. To
Some
de-stress
tools.
myself. What could I do to alleviate some of the stress? Mankind does that. Working with young boys, working in kindergarten would take the stress away of the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
It's easy to get there, for sure. So, yeah, but yeah, there is alternatives. I feel like the theme of this podcast is the alternative, or the alternatives to a stress-riddled life that causes all kinds of diseases and issues. Wow, you can actually live a beautiful, radiant life where you can feel like you're thriving, and the result is this beautiful family who loves you, and the life around you that actually means something. And so you found purpose and passion in working with the youth. And this, to me, is what...
Okay, let's take this whole thing out of here.
It's all good. No, totally fine.
Let's go to airplane mode, and we'll deal with that later. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
modern
Go ahead.
technology. Here we are, modern technology. So with modern technology, Adam, we're able to do this kind of a thing now. This is unheard of 20 years ago, probably
Absolutely.
10 years ago. My cell phone that just rang, modern technology.
Absolutely.
It's awesome. It's a progressive step in a certain sense, and it's real easy to get for me to get into the paranoia of it. It's taking us down. It's the electromagnetic field. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. And yet, when you read a book like Homo sapiens, and I forget his author's name, he's talking about how we've progressed over the years to get to where we are. And we're probably going to keep going forward. And yet, as humans, we're such small player in the overall scheme of things. We're there. So back to, I'm here now. What can I do now? What do I feel good about myself? How do we help young men? How do we help young boys? And the ultimate recipient is I'm helping myself become what I feel is a better person, which allows me to have a more fluid relationship with my partner, a more fluid relationship with other men, a more fluid relationship with the community. And it's easy to take sides. It's easy to be real left, and it's easy to be real right. One of the great North American Indian proverbs is that the extreme left and the extreme right wings belong to the same bird. So it's real easy to be polarized and go back and forth. And I did for a lot of my life. I got very polarized and realizing that now I am the bird. I have the choice. I can stay center. I can be left. I can be right. And how do I draw out of that? So let's go back to P.I.E.S, Adam. Let's go back to what can I do? What can I teach men about their diet, about exercise? And I think there's a middle road for everybody. There's somewhere down the middle road. Intellectually, the same thing. If I'm reading something and I feel really polarized, I want to read something. For me, I want to read something on the other side.
Yeah.
I want to see what that's about.
Yeah, like if you get too focused on reading nonfiction, well, maybe you'd want to read a good adventure story after that. Yeah, sure. Totally understand that.
And exercising, you go, my oldest son is a ultra marathoner.
Wow.
100 miles run. I did 1,300-mile bicycle rides in Colorado.
Whoa.
So proud of him. Unheard of. Unbelievable. And then I think he's done 3 now 100-mile runs. Running 100 miles at 10,000 feet up and down.
Whoa.
Incredible feats of. So that's one extreme. And for him, it worked. And he's kind of graduating out of that. He wanted to prove to himself that he could do it.
See how tough you are. See what you're made of.
We don't have to go there. What we know that those those things are out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the extremes on one side. The extreme on the other side is couch potato.
Totally.
And as much as I want to criticize that, maybe that works for people. Maybe that's okay.
Sure.
And if I can learn to accept that and be okay with it, it's fine.
Well, there's a lot of good movies and shows out there, Bob. You know,
There certainly are.
they're
Yeah.
glued. They're glued to those binge watching, and I definitely have found myself in the same position for sure. So yeah, really getting back to the modern technology and the ability to, inspire, to get the message out, to show men and women that there is deeper meaning in life, and that's really the reason behind this whole podcast. It's pretty simple, to encourage. Show people that there is more to life than a stress-riddled life. There is, health. There is thriving. There is beauty in relationships. Life is not a burden; it's a blessing. So I feel like you're right onto it with everything you're saying. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the Mankind Project here on Kauai?
Sure, we can. So one of the things that propels me forward. Let's go into intellectual. I love affirmations. I love affirmations that are written by other people. I brought a whole book full of them.
Go ahead.
Here. Leadership is doing what is right when no one else is looking. And that kind of stuff. And there's hundreds of them. That now you can Google it and you can find things. You can find affirmations on just about anything you want to do. I wrote a whole little book of them down because I love to read them over. You are not happy because you are well. You are well because you are happy. So that's the intellectual part of it. And that springs over into emotional. And it springs over into spiritual. So now I'm finding that it's fun to take the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and weave them all together. Not hinging on one particular aspect as the panacea of all life. So these, for me, these affirmations are great. I have them plastered all over the house. I have them plastered over my computer. People, I get on a computer and somebody says, "Do you have something to say?" And I usually quote one of those things.
There you go.
Awesome. So, Mankind Project Kauai. So, originally initiated here with Doc Larry Ryan and Jamie DeBonet. Two brothers had been initiated before they came to Kauai. Probably, we're going 15 years back from here, at least. Met and said, "Hey, let's see what we can do." So they pulled in a few other brothers and a few other brothers, and so 12 years ago now, I joined in with them, and that's, of course, when I went over there to straighten them all out and teach them how to do this thing. You know how that went.
Yeah, so you were a completely different man after that, you would say.
I really changed. Sure. Adam, it opened me up to I statements. It opened me up that if it's to be, it's up to me, which I knew that from my grandfather on my mother's side. That's something he said to me. He always said to me, and this is affirmations, where they came from. Grandfather said, "All was beauty here until you came." Right? I mean, how true, Yeah. And so learn to pick up and take it out, pack it in, pack it out, and be responsible. So taking responsibility for my life goes back to P.I.E.S. Take responsibility for physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. I can't say it over and over enough times.
I think you said it. They're like, yeah, it's a well-rounded, it's a wellness approach. Like, it's more of a holistic, way to live your life. Yeah.
And it's simple and easy. It's not, and I do. Ann and I have a whole bookshelf full of everything you can imagine on every one of those subjects.
Nice. I'm going to have to come to your house and check out your library.
Oh, you'll love it, yeah. Ann was a voracious reader. After her divorce, she just wanted to read.
Nice.
And she probably read close to 2,000 books.
I've seen you and Ann around, and what I always notice about you is sometimes you're the only one dancing, first of all, and you look as though you're really enjoying it.
Yes,
we do. Like there is a thriving within your relationship, and I see you. I notice you. Nice.
That's been fun for us. We're always seeking it out. We're missing right now. We're missing the first night in Kauai, and I understand it. Maybe by August 1st, we're going to have first night.
That sounds good. Yeah, we should bring that back.
We're hoping to bring that one back in there. Right now, found out that tonight, Tuesday, we're going to be able to go to Porter Pavilion and we can dance there. I have a
Excellent.
nice dance floor. And
That's what it's about, yeah.
And-
Singing and dancing. You know, Alan Watts, I remember you spoke a little bit about him. He said, man, what if we didn't really have to work or didn't have to worry about sorting out papers and whatnot? What would we be really doing here? You know, if there wasn't like an economy and blah, blah, blah. And it was just singing and dancing, you know,
Yeah.
just enjoying life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's true. And so if we didn't have all these other things to do, and maybe those other things are hunter-gatherer, we'd have to do something.
Yeah, we have to do
survive.
something.
Something
Definitely.
to survive. And, you know, the books I've read in the hunter-gatherer days, they only worked at that maybe 4 or 5 hours out of the waking day.
The minimalist.
They
way.
danced and they played music of some sort,
Yeah.
other parts. So it wasn't so fearful. It wasn't that Sabretooth or the warring neighbor was going to come over and do this stuff. They basically had it together to do that. When in a modern technology, and I was part of this, I'm still part of it, you know, my waking day can be involved in driving my car and fixing my house and the toilet doesn't work and the plumbing doesn't work. And of course, what are we up to, 7 billion people on the earth now? They're important things. It's as important things to have a sanitary system that works, to have
Definitely.
understand plumbing and electricity,
Sure.
and we need to manage it and control it and work through it. And again, we're just a flick, 1 second in the clock of evolutionary process.
Absolutely. So, where do we go from here, Bob? I mean, there's so much to be said. Yet, how? I mean, it sounds like you're doing it. Obviously, there's a very evident that you're a man that actually figured some stuff out about life, and you're living your life the way you know is correct for you. But for somebody who has no idea, for instance, or who has a lot of fear, mantras, you mentioned affirmations, a great way to get that intellectual stimulation going. And let's talk about a spiritual connection as well, as we're, you know, that's the last piece of the pie, right?
Sure.
Or maybe it's the first. I'm not sure. But where have you found your spiritual connection here on the island and also within yourself?
I think my first spiritual connection was really laughing.
Nice.
I mean, it's really interesting because you're asking me really in-depth questions, and I'm not spending a lot of time here. I'm trying to go heart, and that's Mankind's project.
There you go.
Mankind project stuff is helping me relate from my heart and my gut now in Kauai and Hawaii. So let's go back to that spiritual. Where was that?
Where do you find your spiritual connection?
Oh, I said laughing. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So laughing, to me, then became a spiritual connection. Because when I laughed, everything else went away. I was at one. Believe it or not, I was at one with the comedian, with myself. I mean, just think of a good belly roller. When you're laughing, I'm not taking on the sins of the world.
Yeah, everything disappears. Huh? You could just
So that was, I think, for me, now when I look back on it, and it was healing. And I watched Milton Berle, and I watched other comedians before Seinfeld, and I learned that laughing was very healing, and it was then spiritual. It was allowing me to connect with my inner self, my higher self. And then once I realized, like meditation, that there's something there, I would like to explore it a little further. I would like to find out what's inside here or here or here that allows me to have that comfortable place. Springing backward, Joan Rosenberg says, works with uncomfortable, unaccustomed feelings. What are they? What do we do with them? Where do they come from? How do we mitigate them? How do we do that with them? I'm not saying then that laughing is laugh it off, but I'm saying that that's the other side of being still by myself, quietly, with Eckhart Tolle and his tree. Just being still in nature, being quiet, feeling safe there. So that's the beginning of spirituality. Now, next to all, spirituality is connection with nature. For me, it's just, and this is Waldorf stuff. Steiner said, pick a flower. Look at the flower. Look at the 5 petals, the 7 petals. Look at watch a little bug crawl in and out of there. Meditate on that. Be with that. Be with that flower. Where did it come from? It bloomed. It first started as a bud. It bloomed. It came out, and guess what? It fell to the ground, and another bloom comes out. There's a story about Vishnu. Once the umpala flower comes up out, and it goes away, and then another flower. And I think Ram Dass does that really beautifully. He talks about, and another flower, and another flower, and another flower. And then he finally says, Vishnu's all. That's a Joseph Campbell thing. So there's tons of stuff out there. I think
so much out there.
For me, it's easy to get addicted to, I don't know, I'm saying nonsense stuff, but it's only nonsense to me.
Sure.
It has meaning. Fox News and CNN has meaning to people who watch it. They watch it all day long.
Absolutely.
And they believe it. So for me, to get hooked into too much of that nonsense, I'm on the other hand, Carolyn Meese, Joseph Campbell, reading books on purple spirituality, Paul Levy, understanding Wetiko, dispelling Wetiko. What is Wetiko? It's a sickness of the soul. It's what he sees it as that. And I agreed with him. And I said, I don't really want to do that anymore. I don't want to do the 9-to-5 job. And who did that? The Simpsons. Okay, bring the milk in, put the cat out, spank the kids, kiss the wife, go to bed. Get up in the morning, and Homer Simpson's probably still out there doing that stuff. So it didn't seem like there was a fruitful end to that. Because guess what? All the people that I knew that lived that life, they retired, they died.
Yeah.
They retired and died. And I'm like, whoa, I don't want to do that.
No,
I mean,
you're
I want to go
totally
beyond that because
way beyond that.
Because there's a lot to enjoy and there's a lot to share. And I didn't mean to distract you too much from MKP Kauai.
No, absolutely. I think this is a beautiful tangent. I'm happy we went here.
Yeah. And so just putting together and having a fruitful life. And now for me in my life is get up in the morning. It's raining outside. And just think how beautiful the rain is, how necessary.
Totally.
And yet when there's a drought, to be thankful that and be grateful that it's part of a balance that I don't understand.
Yeah.
So there's so much out there that I don't understand in nature. There's so much about humanity.
There's so much mystery. And I feel like you're really engaged with the mystery in life.
Yeah. And one of the things in Mankind Project is that we say in the shadow. So I'll define that a little bit. Jung defined shadow as something about me that I hide, suppress, and deny. What's a part of my life? Who do I let drive the bus? What's an example of that? I don't feel good about myself. So therefore, I'm going to do something because I don't feel good about myself to let that part of my personality take over. I'm not going to come down here and have an interview because, geez, suppose Adam puts this out on the air and somebody thinks I'm a jerk. Okay, so I'm intrepidated not to do that. I don't want to do that thing. Right. Want to do things that are a little more progressive. I'm going to lose. You have to bring me back on track here.
No. I think you're saying a lot that is valuable for people to hear. Really.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So getting the whole pie together is what you're about and what you're saying.
Exactly. And I think that if I wanted to convey a message out there, it would be, look at your life as a pie and divide it up, and then pick up the areas that might be weak. Do a little bit. Don't go overboard with it.
Don't let one letter of the acronym devour you.
Sure. Well, it can. It did me.
Absolutely.
The reason I'm here is because I probably did a lot of that stuff. So can I help you short circuit or shortcut that? I don't know. I'm willing to pick you up when you're down.
That's really important.
Willing to reach my hand out and help somebody, no matter who they are.
Well, there's a willingness within you that I feel like comes with that experience in life and the longevity, and man, it probably could have helped you. When you were at a youth, your brain's not fully developed. You're.
And to say the good for society, it did help. There were people who did that. in my life. I know there were tons of people who reached out when I was down and they had a hand out and they picked me up. So maybe, I'm being perceived as a little bit down on average society.
I don't think that way. I think you're,
You know,
it's there for you, and people do
right.
exist within that framework, and it is quite possible. What you're talking about is a lot more depth and meaning in life and purpose,
Right.
and that's like the extra. Like, yeah, you can exist at a very monotone kind of existence. There's no doubt about it. But there is so much more, here. So that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I would agree. And I guess if I ever feel sad about some things, it's sad that everybody can't have what I'm doing. And then there's a bunch of people out there that say, look, I don't agree with what you're doing. I'm doing fine. I'm existing at McDonald's. I got a 9-to-5 job. I'm making $95,000 a year. I drive a Porsche. I live in a nice house.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And I don't have an argument with that.
No.
I don't have an argument. Didn't work for me.
Well, yeah. Well, thinking that society or the world you live in is just going to just kind of reward you, it's kind of a fallacy, or that kicking the can down the road if you think the next purchase or the next new toy is going to bring you that fulfillment. And I feel like that culture can sometimes reinforce that, like you had mentioned, growing up, there's a lot of cultural kind of permutations on us. So I think it's more challenging to go beyond, for sure. And there's an advanced path that is there for anybody.
The other thought I just popped into my head was that you had mentioned judgments on things. So I think one of the things that's helped me recently is to learn to be non-judgmental. Really embrace that. It's really hard because when I look, I'm working with multicultural stuff right now, cultural appropriateness. So in that, I looked up isms. Well, believe it or not, Google says there's 250 different isms, from ableism to Zootheism. And I have a judgment on most of those isms. And I'm like, wow, that's really fascinating. I have a judgment on Judaism. I have a judgment on, let's go to Zootheism. I have a judgment on that, And so can I mitigate those judgments? Can I have myself live in a non-judgmental world? That means I unconditionally accept everything that's out there as okay for the people that are doing it. And I think I would take that all the way down to if somebody is harming someone else or harming themselves. If I feel like they're harming themselves, or they possibly could do physical harm or intellectual or spiritual or emotional harm, that I should stand up against that. And there are the few things that I do feel really strongly about, and then of course we go from Mother Teresa on one side to police brutality on the other. And somehow there must be a balance point.
Yeah.
There must be something that's out there. It's the bell curve. It's where, at a certain sense, that's where is it average the right thing? Is that the...
Yeah, I'd say status quo.
Status quo is...
normal.
And for me to be judgmental about it, that's nonsense.
Right. Well, you were once that.
I was. Sure.
and I guess I was as well. And it still exists in that that framework for sure. So, well, great. I think that we can probably call it I mean, there's a lot of lessons and wisdom in here that people could certainly tune into. Is there any last impressions you want to leave on the Mantra Dad podcast?
No, just do your best, have fun, learn to laugh at yourself. I've learned to laugh at myself. It's hard. and realize that when I'm in that state, that I am at one. I am at one. When I'm in that, it's one of the times that I'm there, and I can do it through meditation. I can
meditation,
do it
through chanting,
sure.
Through affirmations, through dancing, through swimming,
through stuff,
music.
Let me see. So, interestingly enough, I came down here with a ton of notes.
Sure.
And some friends of mine have said, Bob, why don't you write a book? Maybe that's where I should go next.
I love that.
It's a possibility. Although, more in, I'm more a now person.
Mm-hmm.
Never was really patient, although everybody says to me, wow, you have a lot of patience.
Wow.
I have to practice at it. Patience
Sure.
is
It's a skill.
a skill.
Yeah.
I think it's a skill.
Definitely.
Patience is a skill. And I think it's well rewarded,
Mm-hmm.
patience with my partner,
Yeah.
and especially patience with myself,
Patience and persistence.
patience and persistence.
You're
Sure.
bound to be successful. It's a great
So,
mantra.
great one. Yeah. And the mantras,
Mm-hmm.
the affirmations. I implore
Yeah.
anybody to have a few of them, I mean, here's one hanging on your wall. It says welcome. What a better mantra or better affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Meister Eckhart. Do you remember what his greatest, if you have,
This too shall pass.
no, thank you. Thank you. He said, of all the affirmations, Meister Eckhart, of all the affirmations, the one that is the most gratifying of all those is thank you.
Mm.
And so, Adam, thank you.
Thank you,
for what
Bob
you're
Layer.
doing.
Awesome. It was an honor. The feeling of honor is inside of me right now. There's a wonder to somebody that's still alive in an 80-year-old body to me, and I definitely am inspired to see the example that you set and being an elder here on Kauai and in life, and thank you for your service to the young men, to myself, to the world. Good job.
Thank you.
It's an honor.
You got it.